Hey. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm a PhD student at the University of Stirling, and today I'm going to talk to you about the work that I've done in my PhD so far, focusing specifically on my first experiment. So sustaining attention to something for a long period of time is something that's really difficult to do. I'm sure that we all know this, and I'm sure we all relate when you're doing a long boring drive. At times, you will, be like, oh, where did I go for a minute there? How am I still alive? um, and luckily, most of the time, this is not a problem. You just redirect your attention back again. However, lapses in attention have been the cause of many serious accidents. And this is specifically a problem today because many systems are becoming kind of semi-automatic, which means that humans are quite often given the task to just monitor these systems and pay attention and remain vigilant and able in order to stop some sort of serious accident happening. And so the question is whether there's actually anything that we can do about this. So where we're at now is that it might be possible to develop some sort of wearable assistance system that can kind of monitor your brain activity and monitor your attention, and then maybe even redirect your attention back to the task. If you think of it kind of like a sports watch, maybe when you're running, it'll monitor your pulse, and then every so often it might say your heart rate's too high, you might want to slow down, something like that, but it'll tell you you're not really paying attention and you should be, kind of thing. And so before we can do this, we need to understand what the most reliable markers of a lapse in attention actually are. And so this is what I'm working on. So first we'll look at this in the lab. And just see whether we can replicate effects that are typically found in the lab. But then what we need to kind of do is check whether these markers are actually there when we've got a more naturalistic real-world study, or whether they look different, or whether we can actually still even extract them from the noisier data. So I'm going to take you through the lab study experiment 1, which we've just been working on. Participants wore an EEG cap and eye tracking glasses so that we could measure pupillometry while they did a computerized sustained attention task. And they actually did 2 different versions of the task. So in both versions, what they saw were some dots forming a circle, and there was one blue dot, and it moved around the circle one space at a time. And every so often, it skipped a space. And this was the target event that they had to pay attention and look out for. In one version of the task, they had to respond to this target event. So they just watched the dot move, and then when it skipped a space, they had to respond as quickly as possible. In the other version of the task, they had to respond to each non-target event and then withhold this response to the target event. And the reason that we did this is because there's lots of different sustained attention tasks that exist, but they do usually fall into one of these 2 categories, where you respond to a target or you withhold this response to the target. And the question is whether they actually do. We were just interested to see whether we would see the same neurophysiological markers for each, because if you think about it, they are slightly different tasks. So do they both measure sustained attention in the same way? So we asked this with the same participants at the same time and the exact same visual stimulation. So just briefly, so we're using EEG because we know that brain oscillations can tell us about when and where someone's paying attention, specifically with alpha oscillations, alpha power. And it has good temporal resolution, meaning that we can kind of track attention in real time. And then we're using pupillometry so that we can kind of look at arousal. We know that changes in pupil size are associated with changes in attentional state. And then we also kind of know that there's this kind of link between pupil-linked arousal and cortical spectral power. So we have some data to investigate this link a little bit more. And both can be made mobile. So we have mobile EEG, we have mobile eye trackers. So both can be used in more naturalistic studies and are closer to being able to actually be implemented in the real world. So I have some very preliminary results. I'm still working on my data analysis because I'm far too tempted by trips to the Amalfi Coast. So I have some performance data here. So on the x-axis, we just have block. So block 1 and block 2, because they did 2 blocks of both tasks. And then performance is just percentage hits. And what we can clearly see is that participants performed much better in the task where they had to just respond to the target compared to when they had to withhold this response. which makes sense because withholding a response after constantly making a response is a difficult thing to do. And here it kind of shows us they are slightly different cognitive tasks, which, yeah, like I said, makes sense, but it's nice to see so clearly. So then the next question was, okay, so what does the EEG results tell us? So we did a cluster-based permutation test, comparing hits versus misses in both tasks. And what we found that the alpha power was significantly higher in occipital regions, in the second before participants made an error in the task or missed the target, which suggests that they weren't paying attention. So we specifically made pre-registered hypotheses about alpha power. So that's what I'm showing here. And it kind of tells us that, okay, they might be slightly different, it's not the same task, but they do draw on some kind of similar mechanisms, and the neural markers are the same for each. However, I'm still analysing the data, and we do plan to do some exploratory analyses on other frequency bands because it looks like they might shed some light on what other differences there are, or what differences there are. So like I said, I'm still analysing my data. Unfortunately, I don't have any pupil results to show you, but that's the next step. And then what we're planning to do is being able to kind of track fluctuations over time. So whether we can track these attentional fluctuations with the pupil data, the EEG data, and the behavioural data, and whether they all tell us the same story. And then I will begin collecting data for my real-world experiment, which I am currently setting up. So that's all. Thank you so much to my supervisors and to our technicians who are a godsend, and to you for listening. Thank you.
We have time for a quick question for Emily. Should there be one?
Oops. Thank you. Thank you for your talk. Since it's about sustained attention, I was wondering if you had a look at a time-varying measure of fluctuations in attention over time, something like, sliding time windows or something to quantify how much alpha is, for example, varying over time.
Do you mean how much alpha oscillations fluctuate over time? Sorry, is this?
Yeah, exactly. So rather than a static FFT that you just do once, if it's more, like sliding window type of approach, so that you see fluctuations in alpha.
Yes, that is pretty much what we're planning to look at next.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again, Emily.